By popular demand, it's finally time to figure out how to do background location tracking on Android. Spoiler alert, it's with a foreground service? And before we're going to dive straight into the code here, there's a couple of things that are really good to know. Like the thing I just mentioned basically in the intro is it's implemented through a foreground service, because in Android you have real background services, foreground services, and of course the apps that you're actually running and interacting with as a user. But with the background services, especially if you're talking about location tracking, it's basically up to Android, so up to the operating system, how often you will get like updates on the location. So it's at most a few times per hour, and it's not really said like how accurate that's going to be. All to save resources, and probably also that you cannot track users without them knowing. So you want to implement this as a foreground service, which has a lot of more capabilities. You can continually track the location, but it also comes with more restrictions on some other side, because we don't want you to track users without them knowing. So there's a couple of things that you need to do. You have to add a notification. So there will be a notification that is popping up whenever you start a foreground service. So there you have to provide information at the very least, like, hey, this will cost extra resources. Your battery is going to drain, because that's what's going to happen if you very intensely are going to hit the location services, right? But it's probably also good to note, like, hey, your location is being tracked. That is something that the user needs to know. Also, you need to implement a lot of permissions for this to actually work. So whenever someone installs the app, they're going to see all those permissions, and you have to have a real good reason to actually access all these things and implement these permissions. And actually, one of the permissions, the access background location, is one that is considered sensitive by Google and Android. So whenever you're going to provide an app to the App Store which has the access background location, you're going to have to specify extra reasons why you want to actually use this permission. And there's perfectly valid reasons to use it, right? If you're a delivery person and you're waiting for your food to be delivered, if you have that kind of app, or if you have a taxi service and you want to see where the car is driving, or if you have a fitness tracker and you want to see where you did run or ride your bike, those are totally valid reasons to have this permission, right? But they just want to make sure that you're not doing anything shady here. So please don't do that with this code. That's not why I'm creating this video. Now there's two extra things I want to give you with this video. There's also a way for this functionality to survive a reboot. So whenever the device is rebooted that the user is activated this service on, you can just reboot the whole service and it will start tracking then again. So even if the user reboots the device, this will still work. And the other thing is, I'm not going to explain that in detail, but there is a much easier way to implement all of this. So let me tell you all about that, but make sure to watch all the videos so you don't miss anything. Okay, phew, we finally have some code on screen. Well, XAML, but I'll count it as code. So on the left here, you can see Visual Studio for Mac 2022, still the perfect tool for creating Xamarin.Forms applications on a Mac. On the right, you can see the Android emulator running. Now, of course, don't worry, this all works on Visual Studio for Windows as well. The code will be the exact same. You can just open it there, run it, and inspect all the things. Now, you can see that this is not a file new Xamarin.Forms application that I tend to start with in my videos, but I already implemented the iOS part of this code. So check out the top right corner of your screen right now, where it should pop up the iOS video, or check the link in the video description below if you want to review it later and you want to also implement this for iOS. Now this is months apart, implementing iOS and implementing Android, so the code is not going to be really reused. If you want to really do that, if you want to implement both parts, you might want to rethink a couple of the things that I did here, but it should be fairly easy to do that. So it's not going to show you the best clean code example, but you are going to need to figure out how to fit this into your architecture anyway, right? So I'm just showing you the building blocks, and it's up to you to create something awesome with that. Now, with all of that said, let's start implementing the permissions that I mentioned earlier for Android. So let's go over to our Solution Explorer and see if I can get that to show up a little bit nicer. There we are. And I'm going to go into my Android project. And here I want to go to my properties and get the Android manifest. Now, if I double click this, I'm getting this graphical editor with here at the bottom the required permissions, and I can search for them, or you can edit it by hand in the XML as well. We'll see that later on in the video. So I'm going to find the required ones first, and that is the background location that I mentioned, access background location. You also want to get the coarse location, so that's kind of like the not very fine-grained location. you want to get the file location, at least for what I'm showing you today. If you don't need this, then please don't go checking this thing. Check out the documentation for whatever permissions you need, because the less permissions you can check here, the better, because that will not confuse the user. So if you just need a global location for the user, then the other one is fine, and don't check this one. And I want to do the foreground service, right? So we need to add a permission for that as well, else we will get runtime exceptions and all that kind of stuff. So now the permissions are good. I can close this file. What I didn't mention is that I'm also going to use the messaging center. The messaging center is something that is part of Xamarin.Forms. It's a message queue which allows you to write decoupled code. I tend to not like using it, but in this scenario, it's kind of like, nice to use. If you don't know exactly what it's all about, please check out the top right corner of your screen again, and I would recommend watching that video first so you have an understanding of what the messaging center is exactly. But basically you have to remember that you can just say, hey, I'm going to send this message, and somewhere in a unrelated part of your application you can just say, hey, I want to subscribe to this message, which is identified by a string mostly, and you can catch that message and execute some code in that part of your application without the objects having to know each other. So that's kind of what you're going to see as well, but I would recommend watching the video. So I'm going to create a couple of messages for that to actually get those messages across. Those are just objects as well. So I'm going to right click on my shared project, go to add and do new class. And I'm just going to name this messages. And I'm going to add a couple of messages here. So you could specify all the messages in separate files if that's what you want, but I'm going to add them here all in one file. Now I'll be copying throughout this video some things from off screen, so don't be alarmed by that. But it's a lot to type, and this video would be 3 times as long as I would type everything out. So I'm just going to paste some things in and walk you through what you're going to see here. Of course, all the code can be reviewed on my GitHub repository as well. The code is down in the video description below. So I got a couple of messages, a message for start service, stop service, a location message. So this is actually the one that's going to be sent all the time whenever the service is running, because this has a latitude and longitude. You can add more properties to this if you want to transport more data back and forth, and a location error message in case that you have some kind of error going on and you want to notify the UI from that as well. You can see this is just empty objects for the messaging center to work. So we have that in place. We can send messages around. What we then want to do is create the get location service. So this is actually the actual service that's actually going to do our functionality. I'm going to implement this in my shared code as well. So in my shared project, let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see which project these are. In my shared project, I'm going to say add new class, and I'm going to say get location service. And again, here is going to be a lot of code, a complete class that's coming in, being pasted here. Let me get the Solution Explorer out of the way, and I'm going to have to add a couple of usings here. So let me just first get that out of the way before I show you all the things here. So this one, I'm going to use Xamarin Essentials for this. So that's cool too, and device using Xamarin.Forms. Okay, here we are. So from top to bottom, sorry about this mess here a little bit. This is our get location service, and I got this read-only bool stopping field here, right? It's set to false. This we're going to use to see if we need to break the loop, yes or no, if we need to stop getting the location. Now we got this empty constructor. We don't technically need this, but here we are. And this is the thing that's actually going to do the work. So this run method right here, which gets a cancellation task. Now, cancellation token, excuse me. So with the cancellation token, what you can do is you can give that, create that whenever you call this. We'll see that in a little bit. And then with that token, you can say token.cancel, and then you can decide whatever you want to do with that. But you can kind of like from the outside say if you want to cancel a specific task, yes or no. Now, of course, this is running as a task. It has to go as an async thing that we don't block the whole app or system with what we're going to do here. And then here inside of that run task, you can see we're starting another task, and we're going to say while not stopping. So, while this is going to be false, it's going to loop through here, and it's going to get the location, and it's going to send that location through one of those location messages that we've just seen, and we're going to send that through the messaging center. So that's what's going to go on here all the time, unless we say, hey, we need to stop. Now, you have to watch closely here. This is a try catch. So here here in the catch, whenever something goes wrong, we have that location error message right here. So we're throwing that, and then we're going to send that so we know something is wrong. But just outside of this here, we have this token.throw if cancellation requested. So that's the token that's coming in. And whenever the outside caller is saying token.cancel, this will throw an exception, but it's not inside of this try catch, so it will not do this location error message here. But instead, it will just return, and that will be the end of it, basically. And we're also passing in this task.run here with the token inside of this task that's running here. That's all part of the async running right here. That will then be canceled as well, and everything will be canceled. So this is the thing that's actually going to do the work for us. Now, let's actually go over to, I'm first building all the kind of like prerequisites here, all the helpers that we need to actually get to the thing that we want. But this, I mean, this actually does the thing that we want. And again, if you want to have more parameters in your location message, if you want to send more data here, whatever you can get from, maybe you're not using Xamarin Essentials, maybe you're using something else, or you also want to get I think you also can get the height and some other stuff. You can expand this message and you can just send that through the MessagingCenter, and we will catch that on the other side. We will see that in a little bit. So with that in place, let's now go over to our notification helper, because we need to show a notification on Android, right? Whenever we are starting this service. So I'm going to close this one and I'm going to go back to my Solution Explorer. And this is something that it has to live in Android. So this is something very Android specific. So let me right click the Android project, add new class, and I'm going to name this notification helper, create, and then I'm going to close the Solution Explorer again so that we have maximum width for code here. And again, I'm going to paste in this complete class, so don't be frightened. And again, I need to add some usings here at the top. So add using Android content for the notification, Android.app, and here the notification compat, Android.x.core.app. I guess it's that one. Yes, it is. And here we need to specify the Android.os for some kind of build version. Okay, so there's one squiggly. I'll get to that. But this actually creates a notification that we can show to the user whenever we want to start the service. Now, you have to have some kind of channel ID. You can make that whatever you want. It just has to be unique, because on Android, we have these channels that we're sending notifications to. We have our context, so our context for our Android application. And then you can just set, hey, get service started notification. That's the notification that we want to show to the user. Now, we have to set a couple of things. The intent for this thing, we're going to add a little bit of extra information to this with a title and a message. And we can set this intent, so that's some Android specific stuff. But here we're going to build the actual notification. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this notification compat builder so that we ensure that it's compatible with all kinds of versions of Android. And we're going to set the context for our application and the foreground ID channel. So that's the channel that we're sending it to. And from here, we're going to build it. So we're going to set the content title. This will be the title of our notification. We'll see that when we run it. The content. So this is the actual content of the notification. Now, the small icon, so you have to specify a little icon. I think you can even leave this out if that's what you want, but I decided to do a little icon, so I'll add that right when I explained all this. Set ongoing as true, so you have to show this notification all the time whenever you are going to start the service. So you have to set that ongoing to true, so that it will show all the time inside of the title bar. Then you can, or at least, it's the right thing to do. Maybe you can get around it and not do it, that the user can dismiss it. I mean, that meant that they've seen it, right? But it might be a good thing to do, to just show that notification. And if you can get a reference to the notification that we're actually creating here, I think you might be even able to update like the text here as well. So you could show something useful, right? You could show the coordinates inside of that notification, updating like that as well, and give the user some useful information. So whenever we have Android version O, so Oreo, I think, we can do some extra things. So we can set the notification channel, we can create a new one, we can set the importance, we can set enable lights, enable vibration, do all these kinds of things. So you can play with that as well. I think one of the important things here, haha, important, is going to be a pun, is that you have to set the notification importance to at least low, I think, because it will have to show up in the taskbar for the user. You will have to show a notification that the user can actually see so that they know something is going on. If you don't do that, it will be a runtime exception. It will not work. Now, in the end, we're going to return the notification builder.build, and we're going to actually end up with a notification object that we're going to have to use to actually start the foreground service. So there is that. Now, let me get rid of this little squiggly right here. So I'm going to go to my Solution Explorer, pin this for a little bit, and inside of the resources, I have a drawable, and I'm going to drag here a little icon that I have off screen inside of the drawable. Let's copy it here. It's called location.png. So then whenever I build the actual application, it will pick up on this location name and it will work, and it will show a nice icon here in the taskbar for Android. So I'm not going to do that now. I will do that in a little bit, but just so you know that that's the way to do it. Now, we're back here on our main page, and we're also almost ready to implement stuff in our actual main page to actually trigger this thing. But right now, let's add the actual service on the Android side, because we've implemented the service on the shared code side. So that service, that code should also be reusable for both iOS and Android, right? If you want to do it right, and maybe other platforms that you're supporting. If you would implement this all at the same time, that's what you want to do. But we also need that means nothing to Android, right? That's just our service. So on Android, we have to create this actual service, our actual foreground service. That's actually something that can be registered in the Android operating system, and that's something that can be triggered. So again, let's go to our Solution Explorer, and I'm going to create here in our Android project right now. I'm going to add new class, and I'm going to say Android Location Service. Again, this is not the best name, Android Location Service, but name it however you want, whatever makes sense to you. This is just, very clear, the Android location service, where it lives, what it does. So let me paste in again the complete class. So this is kind of like chaotic. I need to find out better ways to do this for my videos. So let me import all the usings again here. System threading. You can see the cancellation token again already. Binder. Okay, just the intent, and then we're ready. No, we still need the task here as well. All right, so now we got all of them. And so the first thing that we notice is this service attribute on top of the class. This tells Xamarin actually that this is something that can run, that doesn't has to run, it can run as a service. So this is needed to let this translates into something that is on Android that will let this know that this code can run as a service. You also need to inherit it from a service, so that's the other thing right here, so that you can do these overrides right here, and Android knows how to run this thing. Now we have that same cancellation token here again, so that's probably the cancellation token that we can pass in and that we can cancel where we actually get the locations. And here again, kind of like similar to the notification ID. Well, this is the actual notification ID, but the channel ID, we have an ID to kind of like retrieve the notification. So this has to be unique for every notification as well. We don't need the bind, so we're not going to worry about that. We have enough to worry about already. And here we have public override on start command. So this is actually where we're going to start all the things. This is called whenever we say, hey, we want to start this service. So here we're going to create a new cancellation token. See, that's that reference to the thing that we can use to cancel the functionality. Then we're going to create that notification. And I'm going to do new notification helper. That's the thing that we just implemented. And I'm going to say get service started notification. So that's the thing. If I click through here, and you can see that we end up with this code that I just implemented. So this gets the notification. And then we can say start foreground, which is something built into Android. And we can say, hey, with this notification ID and this notification, we're now going to start this foreground service. So that's what we're doing. And while we're doing it, we're again going to do some async here. So we're going to say task.run in a try catch, and we're going to say get location service. So that's the actual shared location service that we have right here that gets the actual location, and we're going to run that. So this is just something that we're going to run all the time as a async operation right here. And finally, you can see we do a try catch. So because if the cancellation is done, we're going to throw that exception, right? So that's being catched here, and we're going to catch it only for an operation cancel exception. So that's the one that's thrown whenever this is canceled. We're not going to worry about any of the details because this is kind of expected. And then in the finally, we're going to see is cancellation requested, and we're going to actually stop, send the stop service message, send that back to whoever is subscribed to this, and then we can act on that, right? So we'll see in the UI what we're going to do with that. So that's kind of like how this works. And then we have to return some kind of start command result, which is a thing from Android as well. And we are going to say sticky, right? So this is something, a command that is sticky because it keeps running. So that's the thing that we need to kind of like return here to let Android know what is going on with our service. Now, here we have the on destroy. So this is kind of like cleaning up our resources whenever the service gets destroyed by Android, by the operating system. We're going to see if the cancellation token is not null, and we're going to cancel that, clean that up, and do call a base. So we don't have a lot to clean up here. So that is our Android location service. And now we're back at our main page example, but it's not time for us to implement code here. So let's go over to our solution one more time and go into our Android project and into the main activity. Because here we need to implement some code for our service as well. Now you can see here that we have this on create, which is kind of like the entry point for our Android application to start running. We have this override for the request permissions, where Xamarin.Essentials is doing its magic. So let's add some more. Well, actually, let's add a little field here to this class first. We need this intent service intent. And this is good. Well, I'm going to show you in a little bit what we're going to do with that. And then I'm going to actually copy some methods here again from off screen. So let me just put those in here. And I probably need to add some usings. Well, you can see the MessagingCenter. So we need Xamarin.Forms here and all the rest we already have. Oh, that's cool. So set service methods. What this does is it subscribes to the start service message. You can see that here. And this means that this class, so the main activity, is going to subscribe to it. It has to have this identifier service started. And then this message is coming in, which is this one. And we're not really doing anything with that. But anyway, so we pass that in and we're going to check if the service is running, which is our Android location service. And well, if it's not running actually, and if it's not running, then we're going to see if we're on Android Oreo or yes or no. And if we are, then we're going to do start foreground service, which is a method that we only have in Android Oreo apparently. And else we are going to do start service. So that's kind of like a slight nuance in which thing that you want to start, but you probably, for compatibility reasons, want to start a foreground service and start service and do that on the right versions of Android. We're also going to subscribe to the stop service method, and maybe then we're going to see if the service is running again, and we're going to say stop service, right? So that's the same between Oreo and all the other versions, and we're going to say stop the service from running, we're done running. So that's how we're going to trigger the actual Android service, and our Android service is going to trigger our shared code service, and now we have this whole pipeline basically building up. Now you can see this is service running is also a method that we implemented here, and we're going to go through the activity manager, which is something built into Android, and we're going to get the system service, and then we're going to loop through the services, and we're going to see if we can see if our service is actually running. Now you can see this gives us squigglies, and if you go over here it says deprecated. This is not maybe the greatest thing, because with this it was possible to get all the running services on Android, and you could do bad things with that. You could see whatever is running on the whole OS, also other apps. And luckily Android decided that that is not possible anymore. So it's obsoleted, but the get running services will still get the services that are specific to your app. You can still use this to get kind of like the running services on your application and see if you want to do something that way. Of course, you can also toggle some other fields. We will see that in a little bit. Maybe that's better to use to see if the service is running, yes or no, and maybe make decisions depending on that. But this code still works for now. So, as long as it works, don't touch it basically. And now we do still need to set the service methods, right? So we need to implement that. And what we want to do is actually get that intent, because we're using that here as well. So just before this load application here, before we go to Bootstrap our Xamarin.Forms application, we're going to set that service intent is a new intent of main activity and then type of Android location service. So that's how we make the connection between our app and that service. And we're going to do set service method, so that subscribes to our MessagingCenter things. So that is done. Now it's finally time to go to that main page and actually start doing the things to toggle this service. So we can click this button for start, stop, and do all these things. Now let's go over to our solution again, and in the main page, mainpage.xaml.cs, we can see that there's already a lot of code for iOS, which I already mentioned, right? So don't worry about that too much. I know it's a little bit confusing, but I'm sure you're smart enough to figure it out. So here we have this button clicked, which is whenever you click this button, something's going to happen. So let's inspect what's already here. This is going to check with Xamarin Essentials if the permissions are already there for the location always. And if it's denied, then we want to let the user know that they need to accept, and then we are going to return. We're not going to do anything. You can implement your own logic here to let the user know, maybe enable it, try to enable it again, but we're not going to bother with that for now. And here we're using the cross geolocator, which is another plugin, which is the predecessor of Xamarin Essentials geolocation. And that is perfect for Xamarin iOS, for the iOS part of this, but we're not going to worry about it. Luckily, Xamarin.Forms gives us the tools to check if we're running on whatever platform we're running on, basically. So device.runtime platform can give us that information is device.ios. And whenever that's the case, we want to keep this code intact, and else we want to just run the stuff for Android, right? So this is now specific to iOS. We're not going to worry about any of this. And also you can see here this current position change. This is something that is hooked up here. So we're not going to use this. But, you know, like I said already earlier, you probably want to figure out some way to reuse the code that's in here. In this case, I'm just printing out the locations. But that's the code that you actually want to use to process in your app, right? So that's code that you want to figure out how to share between iOS and Android, ideally as well. Okay, so now that we got this set up, I'm going to leave this alone for now. I'm going to come back to this. But what I first want to do is here in our main page, I want to hook up all the subscriptions to the MessagingCenter as well. So here under the initialize component, let's paste in some things here. And what you can see here is that, again, I'm going to do a device runtime platform is device Android because we only want to run this on Android, right? And here I'm going to subscribe to all the MessagingCenter things, basically. So first thing, location message. So this is whenever a location message is coming in, our service has looped and got another location. Then we're going to say device.begin invoke on main thread because we want to run this on the main thread. Whenever you want to update the UI, it needs to happen on the main thread. I'm going to update the label with a environment new line, the latitude, longitude, and the current time so that you can see that something is actually happening. I'm doing the same thing in the console.write line so that you can see it in the console output as well, which is really helpful if the app is running in the background or actually killed. So we can see that as well. Here the stop service message. So whenever the service is stopped, I'm going to update the label with, hey, the location service has been stopped, just so the user knows something has happened. And for the error, kind of like the same thing, I'm going to update the label and say there was an error. You probably might want to do some more useful things here, but this is how I did it right now. So that's what we need for actually subscribing for all the things. So that's going to happen for Android. Now we want to, of course, actually trigger something with this button. So I already made that little check, see if this is something that we want to do on iOS. Now let's go to the else if, and I'm going to do the else if we're running on Android. I'm going to use a little thing that is called Xamarin Essentials preferences, which is a very easy way to save some preferences to like your device. So let me implement the right using here, and I'm going to say preferences.get, which is a key. So I'm going to use this key, location service running. I'm going to specify a default value for if the key doesn't exist. So the first time it won't exist and it will return false. And if it false, it's going to call start service. And whenever this field is already there and the location service is running and it's set to true, then we're going to stop the service. So this is kind of like a toggle that we're going to use, a little field that we're going to write somewhere on the file system, like is our service running, yes or no. And why I'm doing that with a preferences and somewhere on the file system has to do with surviving a device boot, so that we can pick up if the location service should be running. I'll handle that a little bit later in the video, but also like, it's running in the background. So this also makes it very easy to use the preferences API somewhere else that's not connected inside of our app and check if something is going on. So that's something super helpful as well. So now let's paste in the start service and stop service here as well. So we have this start service, which is going to create a start service message, and we're going to send that. So that's going to be received by our Android service, right? Or actually by our main activity. Then the main activity is going to start the Android service, and the Android service is going to start our cross-platform shared code service. Then the preference is not set, so we're going to set this location service running to true. So that's this thing, right? And then we're going to update our label with location service has been started. So you can see that it's actually started. Now here for our stop service message, we're going to say stop service message. I'm going to send that message, which is going to end up amongst other places here, right? We are subscribed here, and we're going to set the label to this thing has stopped, and we're going to set the preferences to false again, so that whenever we end up here, it's false and it's going to start it again. And actually, this is, I'm going to say, this is all we need to do to implement this service, but it's quite a ride, right? So let's stop and actually restart the application right now, and we should see this in action. So whenever this is coming back up, it's not really going to do anything. It's maybe going to register the service already in the background for Android so that it knows it exists. But what's a really cool thing while this is building, let me just show you. Here in the emulator, you have this little menu with the 3 dots here, and whenever you click that, you have a blade with location. Now you can set a single point as a location, but you can also do routes here, which is really cool. So this is like the scenario where you are actually driving or doing whatever, walking through a couple of places. And here we're going from the Microsoft HQ, so the Microsoft campus, to the Pike Place, which is in Seattle. So this is quite something. And I can just say play route, and I can even adjust the speed to make it go faster. But what you can see here also at the bottom is that you can see the coordinates are scrolling. So we're actually like, running or driving or doing whatever right now, which is very helpful in testing this scenario. Let's just click this button and see what happens. Well, we first have to allow the background service right here. So of course you have to select if you want to run this in the background and survive reboots and that kind of stuff. You're going to have to say allow all the time. So you probably also want to really test and handle all the scenarios where people are using other permissions, but I'm going to go through the happy path and say allow all the time. And then you can see the notification is popping up, and it also starts scrolling with the actual coordinates here. So you can see the coordinates are scrolling by with the time so that we can see something is actually happening here. And in Visual Studio, I should be able to bring up here application output. Here we are. So here you can see the coordinates are scrolling by as well. And what's really cool is now if we go to the background, you can see that this keeps on scrolling. The coordinates will still keep coming in. See? It got me worried there for a second because there was a little delay. But I can also even close the application and it will still keep running. This is our service at work, right? So you can see it's still running here. And even our debug session is still going to be working here. So, and whenever I go back up, well, actually, let me just bring down the status bar right here. You can see that this notification with my cool icon is here as well. So your location is being tracked. And if I click this, it will bring it back up and it will continue scrolling all the coordinates right here. Until I say stop, it will say location service has stopped. And you will see that it stops scrolling the coordinates. So now our service is stopped as well. And that's basically how to implement this with the background scrolling. Now, I also promised you that you want to maybe do this on a reboot, which is kind of like a whole world in itself, because now what you're basically going to do is say whenever the application or the device is being rebooted, the application will come back up kind of automatically, and then it will just start the service. So what we want to do is add even more permissions right here. So what we want to do is go to the solution, go to Android, properties, Android manifest. So let me right click and do open with source code editor and get this out of the way for a little bit, because we need to add some extra things here. And we want to first get 2 new permissions, which is the receive boot completed. So that's kind of like the event for whenever a boot has completed. So whenever the device has been booted, and a system alert window with which we can open the kind of like system settings and make the user change something. Why that is needed will become apparent in a little bit. And what we need to do is inside of the application node, which is right here, we want to register this boot broadcast receiver as well. So this kind of like registers a thing where we want to register a class that will be triggered whenever a boot broadcasts, so whenever the event is broadcasted throughout the Android operating system that a boot has happened, and we want to trigger some code that way. So take special note of this name right here, because that's the thing that we're going to have to match in a little bit, because we have to also now implement a boot broadcast receiver in code. So let me create a little thing here again in Android, add new class, which is going to be called the boot broadcast receiver. And I'm just going to paste that in here, and I got to do a couple of usings here again with IntelliSense. But while that's coming up, you can see that this is the actual name that has to match, right? So make sure that this matches, else your boot broadcast receiver will not work. So let me add the right usings here. The intent filter is needed for the right intent right here, which is not the right one. There we are. And what this will do basically is it will receive whenever the boot has completed of the device. It will see like if this is the intent that we want it to do. We'll implement that in a little bit. So the action boot is completed, because you can do this for all kinds of other events as well. And what we're going to do then is we're going to start the activity, which is our main activity, right? So which is our main activity is the entry point for our application. So basically what we're going to do on boot is say, hey, we want you to start our application. So it's going to bring up our application, kind of like whenever you do it on Windows, you have these applications that are starting automatically. This is our application now as well. So you probably also want to really think hard on if this is something that you want to do, because it can be kind of annoying because it will come to the foreground automatically. So the users might not like you doing that basically. Now, back to our main activity, we need to do some things here as well. So let's go to our main activity in the Android project. And what we want to do here is add a little private class, because private field, sorry, because Android likes to work with these identifiers. So we need this request code, which can be anything, basically just come up with a unique number for your application. Now with that in place, we want to do an extra thing. So I'm going to add some code here under the set service method. So whenever our app is being started, we want to do this little check here. We want to see if we can actually do something as an overlay, and an overlay is something on Android where it doesn't actually start your application, but it just shows your application as an overlay on top of the other thing, and you need permissions for that. That's one of the things that we just added as well. And we want to check if we cannot draw this as an overlay, and apparently it's only possible from Android Marshmallow M and up. So we don't want to do this little thing right here, and we want to start the activity to actually make the user give us permission to draw this as an overlay. And additionally, what we want to do is then override here on our main activity to get the actual activity result. So that's kind of like that little ID that we have here, the request code. We're going to see if whenever this comes back from the Android OS, we're going to see if this is the actual ID. So if the request code that is implemented by invoking this thing is the request code of our application, and then we want to be sure that we can draw the overlays here, and now we have everything we need to make our application come back up whenever the device is rebooted. Now then there is one more thing that you want to do, which is actually in the main page.xaml.cs. So let's go back here, and what you want to do is again check that preferences field to see if the service is actually supposed to run, right? So here in our Android check, and we subscribe to all these things here, right at the end, we want to check like, hey, in our preferences, is the location service running? If that is true, then our service is actually supposed to run because the device is rebooted, right? So the service is not going to come up automatically. So we want to, our application is coming up automatically now, and we're going to check our little field that we've written to the file system earlier, if our location is supposed to be running, yes or no. And if yes, it's going to start the service, and then we're back into our cycle of the service is starting, it's running in the background again, even though the user has kind of like rebooted their device. I'm not going to actually show you this in the code. I'm going to save this. All the code is in the GitHub repository because there's a lot to cover here, so you might want to have a reference. But that is how you can even make this survive a reboot of the device, and how to implement background location tracking on Android. Okay, so are you still with me? Because this was a lot to take in, right? So, but now you've learned how to use the background location tracking on Android, which is actually in a foreground service, but anyway, who's counting, and also how to do it whenever a device is rebooted, which can be very helpful at times as well, right? So whenever you reboot, I didn't show the demo, but whenever you reboot, the application will come back up as soon as you got that overlay permission. Then the notification will come down as well, and everything will follow the flow that we've seen earlier. So that's how you can really implement this background tracking. Now, another thing that I promised you is to tell you how to do this easier, which is probably something that you might want to look into because other people has done this before you, wrapped it in a little library and made it easier for you to use. I like to know what's going on under the hood, so that's also why I made this video, but you can do it much, much easier if you use a plugin called Shiny. And Shiny can do a lot of things: background processing, work with Bluetooth, work with NFC, and a lot of other things, also working with location tracking in the background. It's created by Alan Ritchie, who is a well-known and respected member of the Xamarin community. So thank you so much for putting it together. I really have to start making videos on Shiny as well. I don't have any at the time of recording, at least. But with Shiny, please look into it. This should be much, much easier. And under the hood, it uses kind of like this whole thing that you've seen here as well. Another question that you might have is, can I do this in .NET MAUI? Yes, you absolutely can. And in fact, I think all the code, except for like, you know, in the shared code for Xamarin.Forms where you had to kind of like put the stuff, well, we still have buttons in .NET MAUI. So I think 99% of this code can be reused, copy and pasted into .NET MAUI, maybe in some different places, but you know, it should just work there. But if you can't figure it out, please let me know down in the comments below, and I'll be sure to make a little follow-up video and show this in .NET MAUI, or help you on your way in the comments as well. Now, I hope that you finally know how to implement this all in your own application. Thank you so much if you've made it all the way into this video, because I know it's a long one this time. So maybe we should have a code word for the really cool people that actually made it to this point. Maybe penguin unicorns. Let's make it penguin unicorns. Make sure that you comment penguin unicorns somewhere inside of a sentence in the comments, and I'll know that you're one of the really hardcore watchers that made it on the way up to the end. And if you did that already, please like this video, because this one especially has been a big effort on my part. So please like it so it can spread to more people, and it will be really, really helpful. Click the subscribe button to be notified of new content on this channel automatically, because there's a lot more awesomeness still to come. And I'll be seeing you for my next video, but not before I tell you that you can find all kinds of other cool Xamarin.Forms stuff in the playlist right here. And you can find that video on implementing this on iOS if you want to still review that in this video right here. And make sure that this one is lit up so you're subscribed. See you next time.